Welcome back. It is April 18th, 2023 workshop, resuming from a lunch break and calling this meeting to order. I'm Karen Rose. I'm filling in for Bridget Ziegler as chair, and I would like to welcome the conversation, very much needed conversation on pre-kindergarten, and welcome Tracy Cardenas and Dr. Johnson. Dr. Foster, is there any introduction you would like to make to this conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So I know we've had a lot of conversation over the past few school board meetings and school board workshops, and thought it was best to have Ms. Cardenas come and give a presentation to pre-K, giving the ins and outs of everything of what program we were offering, what options we, are available to us, so that we can have, discussion as far as, kind of where we are with our pre-K programming and next steps. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Johnson and to Ms. Cardenas.
All right, once again, good afternoon, everyone. And Dr. Foster, thanks for kind of setting that up. Really, it's an opportunity to clarify. I know I've made the same mistakes that I've heard some of us speak to, not only the community, families, teachers, myself, of what is preschool, what is early learning, what is VPK. We could go on and on with different programs. And then second, what is the work we've been doing with the community itself? Early Learning Coalition, Head Start, and other programs that we work with. And so our expert here over to my left, Mrs. Cardenas, is going to go through. And as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, please stop us. I will let her take the lead, but we'll also chime in when necessary, kind of based on information you guys are sharing. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Tracy.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So as he said, I'm Tracy Cardenas. I'm the director of preschool here in Sarasota. It's very nice to be with all of you today. I'm here because I would really like to give you all the opportunity to kind of understand some of the terminology that we're using, as well as some of the programs that we have within our district and throughout our community. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to just kind of focus our attention on some of that terminology. When we think about what is the difference between preschool, voluntary pre-kindergarten, and what are other pre-kindergarten programs, you'll see that sometimes people will refer to our district programs as being VPK. And it is confusing, but it's not, it's rather simple when you start to think about it in terms of how we are offering those programs. So preschool and VPK, Children First, Head Start programs. Sometimes we can think about daycare or early childhood. There are so many different ways that we refer to what we consider early learning. This slide kind of highlights for all of you what we're talking about. Preschool, when we say the word preschool, we're typically referring to programs that serve students ages 3 to 5. When we talk about voluntary pre-kindergarten, we're really talking about a way to fund early learning services for 4-year-olds. That's coming out of the state of Florida. It's an education model that ensures that all of our 4-year-olds throughout the state of Florida have access to what we might call free pre-kindergarten programming, and I'll talk a little bit about that and further. We also have within our community Head Start programs. Those are managed through Children First. So to start, we're going to begin with an overview of what we offer here for the 22-23 school year. We have 23 elementary school sites. Out of those 23 elementary school sites, there are 15 sites that offer preschool programming. Out of those 51 preschool classrooms, 14 are what you may consider early learning classrooms for 4-year-old students, or what we might call general education inclusive classrooms. Some people refer to 4-year-old programming classrooms also as pre-kindergarten. And I know that sounds kind of muddy when we were talking about preschool, pre-kindergarten, but again, those are basically just 4-year-old classrooms. So you must be, 4 years old on or before September 1st, similar to what you might be if you're going into voluntary pre-kindergarten. The 37 ESE preschool classrooms serve 3 to 5-year-old students that are receiving exceptional student education or special education services. We also contract with 5 agency sites to prevent parental options. Those sites include Children First, Florida Center, Pinnacle, The Haven or Selby Preschool, and Easter Seal Southwest Florida or Lily School. And those give more options for our parents. When looking at our early learning classrooms and having those throughout our community and within our district, the consideration was made that we would look at risk students or students who may be disadvantaged while building programming that may be inclusive for our students with disabilities. We gave the following priority consideration for those students and allowed them to access those programs within our district. It should be important to note that there are other programs that service those students throughout our community, such as our Head Start providers, VPK, and through the Early Learning Coalition. So taking a look at this slide, this refers back to our Sarasota LEA profile, or our local education agency profile. The reason why this is here is because there are many indicators, as we've heard earlier today, and you hear, I think, regularly at your meetings, that are aligned with how we're providing exceptional student education supports and services. Indicator 6 looks at preschool environments, and the reason why this is included here is so that you have a broader understanding of why we have some of those agency contracts, so that we can make sure or ensure that we're providing inclusive options for our students with disabilities, not only within our district, but outside in the community as well. There's also indicator 7, which talks about student outcomes. We have the data for 21-22 school year. It's considered lag data. And out of those 6 indicators the 6 breakdowns for indicator 7, we made 3 of those indicators matching up or exceeding the state target. 3 of those indicators we did not. Again, it should be important to note that 21-22 was an interesting year as we came back after the impact of the closures from COVID-19. We also switched from the way in which we were collecting information on student outcomes as required by federal and state law from the Battelle Developmental Inventory to a new process called the Child Outcome Summary process, which may also have impacted those scores. Here is our ESE preschool trend data. If you notice from these slides, and again, the furthest bar, which shows the current year, is just up to the date that this presentation was submitted. Each year, we're seeing an increased number of referrals coming through our Sarasota County School Office. And so that's making us be sure that we're able to provide those services for those students. Working with Dr. Johnson, the elementary team, and our school principals, we've been able to open up additional classrooms to serve preschool students ages 3 to 5 that have been found eligible for services. That's been a tremendous focus, especially as we look at ensuring that all students are ready to learn in kindergarten, including our students with disabilities. So that's been a tremendous focus all along. Segueing into just continuing to explain, while the Sarasota County School District really has primary responsibility for serving our students with disabilities, our Early Learning Coalition partners are tremendous in our collaborative work in ensuring that students are grade level reading. The Early Learning Coalition falls underneath the Florida Department of Education, the Division of Early Learning, and is run by a new gal, Miss Carrie Miller. And Miss Carrie Miller is our Chancellor of Early Learning, and she shared some of the following slides at a recent conference in February for directors of pre-kindergarten throughout the state of Florida. She used to be on the vice chancellor, I believe, of Just Read. I'm not sure if you might have to fact check me on that, but I know she was involved with that. And now she's come over and is serving up as head of the Division of Early Learning. The Division of Early Learning's tremendous focus is on voluntary pre-kindergarten. The reason why they have this focus is because they are really concerned with that kindergarten readiness, if you will, and looking at how we're providing free to all Florida families the opportunity to engage in voluntary pre-kindergarten. So her focus has been working with all of our early learning directors across the state that are in these early learning coalitions. Our Early Learning Coalition is headed up by Janet Kahn, who's the Chief Executive Officer. At the conference where I was fortunate enough to attend, Ms. Miller shared our kindergarten readiness rates. What you're looking at is statewide data, or our VPK completer data across the state of Florida. As a result of that, they're looking at what is the impact. So when we have students coming into kindergarten who may not be completely ready, ultimately later on it has an impact on our reading scores in third grade. So if we think about that, our partnerships with the Early Learning Coalition, with our Head Start friends, becomes even more important because a majority of our students are being served throughout our community, and they're working just as hard as they can to make sure that everybody is entering into our schools ready to learn. In the same way that we're ensuring that our student achievement continues to grow. And so now the Division of Early Learning and the Florida Department of Education have really taken notice and have a stronger invested interest in how they're going to move forward to support those programs. Ms. Miller showed this statewide data that shows our reading data over time, a little snapshot, if you will, from 2015 till now, as further evidence of the dramatic impact of those partnerships formed between school districts and Early Learning Coalition and Head Start members. Oh, I want to go back just for a minute. I apologize. The reason why this is also highlighted is because it's important for everyone to understand that although the Sarasota County School District does not offer at the present time school year summer VPK programming, our community does. And the state of Florida has invested in 2022. The legislature came up and they passed additional funding per student funding. I think it's about $300 more, maybe it's $314 per student throughout the state of Florida to beef up VPK. The other things they're doing is increasing the literacy requirements and related. So a school year program, what does that look like? It covers 540 hours, and it can be held at any provider that meets specific requirements. Our school district is required to offer a summer VPK program and has annually over the course of many years. Those VPK programs and the funding from those programs are managed by the Sarasota Early Learning Coalition. There are certain specific staffing requirements for school year VPK programs that look a little bit different than our ESE preschool programs. Our ESE preschool programs are taught by a certified teacher, where the school year VPK program, where often may be taught by a certified teacher, they don't necessarily have to have that requirement. So what does it look like? According to Janet Kahn, on information she shared back in February, so this is information reflective of that time, there's about 155 plus early learning providers throughout our community. The total license capacity for those providers is between 7,600 and 8,000. At that time, enrolled in VPK, there was a total of 1,573 children. And in our school readiness, or children that were accessing school readiness, there was 1,132 students being served at that time. These are the changes that I was referring to in 2022. They allocated an additional $52 million, and I was close. It's not 314 per student, it's 317, so. All VPK instructors must meet a 5-hour early literacy component, and it's important to note that they included at the state level voluntary pre-kindergarten in the new FAST requirements. So they are required to participate in STAR early literacy. Already, we've been working with the Early Learning Coalition in finding out how we can share data between our two entities so that we can be sure that as students come in, that they're ready to learn. There's an additional requirement that we plan for students that aren't making those benchmarks to make sure that the Early Learning Coalition has plans in place so that we have some remediation prior to the start of school. This particular quote is from Kathleen Sullivan. She's the Vice President of Programs for Children First, who's managing our Head Start programs. They are the grantee for Sarasota County. We do have a contract with them so that we can ensure to provide services for our students that are receiving exceptional student education services and supports. They are required to serve at least 10% of their population as students with disabilities. So what does all this partnering mean? Well, this means that when we're getting together as a community, we're having really important conversations about professional learning. Remembering that all providers are responsible for the Florida Early Learning Developmental Standards, birth through age 5. What's really cool about it is that the Department of Education's Division of Early Learning has now made a crosswalk. So we have a crosswalk between reading and math, starting at our 4-year-old programs into K through 3. So if you look at language arts beginning in, say, 4 years old and on up, we have opportunities to collaborate on, hey, how does this look in your program and how does this look in ours? And that's same for our students with disabilities. They are still being taught those same standards within our school, and we're making sure that our curriculum resources are aligned with what's been approved at the state level. The Division of, I talked about the crosswalks, but we have specially designed instruction for our ESE, and we do conduct ongoing progress monitoring for all of our classrooms. While our preschool classrooms are not required to do the STAR Early Literacy, that's a requirement for VPK, and there were not state funds set aside for regular preschool programs or ESE programs. Those funds were set aside for voluntary pre-kindergarten. We are required to progress monitor, and we do, utilizing the Brigance inventory for early development, and we do that across board for all of our learners. We've already collected that data from last year to this year. We have progress monitoring period 1 and 2 already completed. We also are required through the Every Student Succeeds Act for the child outcomes summary process for ESE outcomes. That's required by the Florida Department of Education. Going back to those community partnerships, we offer professional learning in partnership with our friends at Children First and the Early Learning Coalition. They will often send directors or other folks to attend what we do, just as we're invited oftentimes to attend what they do. We have ongoing coaching, training, and direct support for our teachers, and we also will support teachers out in the community as well as needed and when asked. The family and parent engagement opportunities that we've been doing throughout this year and in the past have been really, really cool. There's some neat things that are emerging with some of these partnerships. The Early Learning Coalition had a special storybook event that was very well attended. Over 1,000 families attended at STC. We have an upcoming event for pre-K to K transition, which is our focus coming up into 23-24 school year. Really honing in on that kindergarten readiness. And so the idea is that we're going to have a huge party. There are 2 dates coming up just around the corner, not next week, the week after, on 2 Wednesdays, or maybe it is next week. Oh, I have to look back. In any case, I'll make sure that you guys get that information, and that information gets out there in the community. Is already been shared out in the community as well on those parent and family engagement days, where families can bring their family, the families can bring their children, and then it's like a huge celebration. We will have pizza and chicken nuggets and so forth coming up around the corner. I'll make sure I get that date before I leave. Focusing on the transition into kindergarten, the big thing is that from the National Center on Quality Teaching and Learning and the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement, that pre-K to K transition and that collaborative partnership, ensuring that we've engaged all of our stakeholders, is really critical. It's critical especially for our students who we may consider at risk, but for all learners, to make sure that they're connected with the school that they'll ultimately attend. And I should mention, for our upcoming party celebration, there will be kindergarten teachers attending, so that's really neat too. We're going to have it here at STC and then also in South County. There are 1,825 days between birth and age 5 in which 90% of brain development has already occurred. I think there's little debate on the importance of early learning or on pre-K. And I think that if you talk to anyone throughout our community, they will echo that importance and that focus. And so as we continue to build our programs K through 12, continuing those conversations with folks in the community on how we're doing serving our students with disabilities, as well as how we're partnering with those folks, becomes even more critical. So having said that I'd like to thank you for your time, and I definitely want to get those dates on record at this workshop for all of our families.
Thank you. I'm an extraordinarily strong advocate for early learning, voluntary pre-kindergarten, whatever, any of the various titles you were giving to those opportunities. I was an elementary teacher for 13 and a half years, and it's obvious the incoming kindergartners who's had those early learning opportunities and who have not, and so which is reflected in the data that you have shared. My questions are, we started, of which I pushed hard and heavy for, a voluntary pre-kindergarten program in addition to the traditional pre-kindergarten program for students in that have special education, exceptional student education needs. It was shocking to me to find out that we were totally funding the voluntary pre-K with a combination of foundation funds and largely ESSER dollars, which are the COVID relief dollars, and those are temporary. And so there's, I understand from Mrs. Penner that the plan was to automatically go into using referendum dollars, and that's how we've landed where we've landed. And tremendous confusion and misinformation in the community. So this was very much needed. I don't think from my individual standpoint that it's an automatic going into referendum dollars. When I look at referendum dollars, I'm looking at our original commitment to the community, which we tend to stray from, and that is the arts community and the arts in our schools reflecting the culture of Sarasota County, and funding teacher pay for additional hours in the school day and continuing to fund that, and therefore the quality of teachers, the recruitment and retention of teachers is huge and front and center. And then thirdly, guidance counselors. And I don't know that we've increased guidance counselors, and I don't know that how we're using the referendum dollars to continue to impact teacher staff pay. So there's a lot of questions in this piece. I think the community needs to know that this board has not voted on a budget that deletes pre-K. There needs to be some tremendous conversation. So I think the community needs to know that the voluntary pre-kindergarten programs, less than 200 students that have been established, and I'm an incredible advocate for that, have been funded with dollars that are not sustainable. That doesn't mean that we can't go forward, but there's got to be a lot of layers unpeeled and a lot of conversation. So I moved toward, you gave a lot of definitions. You talked about the agencies, and I had an opportunity to go and tour the Early Learning Coalition with Mrs. Skoglund, and wow, she's impressive. It was impressive. There was a board member there. Learned a lot. The part that I don't understand still right now today is, and you mentioned it in your presentation, and perhaps Mrs. Penner needs to answer, and not necessarily you or Dr. Foster, that we are contracting with them. What is that money and where does it come from? Is it money that the state's giving us for voluntary pre-kindergarten and it's passing through us to the coalitions? I don't understand how that works, and given that we're entering into a budget process and budget decisions, and this is quite an emotional subject, which it should be, that I want to know what that means. What are we contracting for? Where's the money coming from? Would that money come to us for our voluntary pre-K? And then I've been told, and I don't understand it wasn't part of this presentation, that our voluntary pre-K wasn't getting any state funding, that in order to get state funding for voluntary pre-K, that we would have to meet a certain set of criteria that we aren't meeting. So there's a lot of misinformation out into the community, and I'm willing to take the heat for all of it, but at the same time, I'm going to peel away every layer of it and make it very visible to the community. So there is the fiduciary piece of who's on first and who's on second with contracts and money, and what criteria, and why didn't we do the criteria? So there's that question, and then I have a few more, and I will turn it over to others on this dais.
Can I just mention one thing, and I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Johnson? I just want to be clear that the program that we currently have in our schools today is not VPK. We are not offering VPK currently in our schools during the regular school year. We're offering pre-K. So that is where, and I'll let you kind of share a little bit more, but typically if you do VPK, then those dollars would go through the Early Learning Coalition. The Early Learning Coalition does keep a percentage, I think it's 4%, so that they can help with the administration of the program, and then the dollars would flow from the state through the Early Learning Coalition to us. But the program that we are offering is pre-K, totally self-funded through ESSER dollars and not through state funds.
Okay, so the community thinks that all the emails, which have been justifiably and with great validity numerous on, have been perceived as VPK. So there's a lot of unpeeling, unfolding, doing our best to be transparent and making great decisions for every student. So given that we're doing pre-K and not VPK, is there no state funding for pre-K?
So let me do this. Let's answer the first question about contracts, and then we'll kind of work our way to everything and kind of follow through with Dr. Foster. So the contracts themselves, Tracy, please kind of explain how that works.
Sure, absolutely. So just going back to what Dr. Foster was saying, we don't offer school year voluntary pre-kindergarten or VPK programs at that time, keeping in mind that that's a funding opportunity that we could explore in the future were we so inclined. We offer ESE, or Exceptional Student Education programs for students with disabilities. We had the opportunity through ESSER, as many districts did throughout the United States, to provide early intervening services for students that were at risk, largely due to COVID-19. Those were early learning 4-year-old classrooms, or you could call them pre-kindergarten, or you could call them preschool, which becomes very muddy and very confusing because those terms are often used interchangeably. I still get folks today that say, "Are you the VPK director?" And I'm like, "No, I'm the director of preschool." "Are you the director of pre-K?" "Well, yeah, I guess you could call me the director of pre-K," because we interchange those. Sometimes we get families calling saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a great daycare." And I'm like, well, we're not really in the daycare business. We need to call the Early Learning Coalition, and they will help you find daycare. I think that when we talk about funding, we have to think about the ways in which preschool is funded, which looks somewhat different than it does K through 12. Largely, there are different pockets of money that can be set aside, and those are things and opportunities that anyone can explore if they're so inclined. What we do is primarily exceptional student education, and that's why we have those contracts in place, in that those funds are generated through ESE dollars, and they're specific for students who need exceptional student education services. So when we look at those contracts with Selby or with Children First or Florida Center, as you mentioned, you were with Christy Skoglund, so I imagine you may have been at a Florida Center, or maybe you were at the ELC board with some of those folks. Those folks will contract, they allow us seats, if you will, in their environment to provide our students with disabilities options on how they're going to have those services provided for their children, including inclusive opportunities. Keeping in mind that traditionally for many years, our programs have mostly just served ESE. So when we think about our least restrictive environment, some families are looking for an inclusive option for students with disabilities. And so that's why we have those contracts.
So you're saying that the early learning for 4-year-olds that we have offered, it was essentially a remedial program to serve students that would benefit, that it is in no way, shape, or form was ever meant to be. Unfortunately, it wasn't communicated. There are a lot of our community that perceived it as an ongoing program. And then when I look at that we were going to continue to do it with referendum dollars, there's per, input of what the finance department was perceiving, there's so much misinformation. So essentially, it's remedial.
If you recall in the slides that I shared, the eligibility considerations included things like free and reduced lunch, at risk for homelessness, and so forth. And so those considerations would make that consideration for an early intervening program, much like you might have at a Title I school that may be accessing Title I funds for pre-K. They looked at it as an early intervening program. And there were a lot of districts that used ESSER funds or ESSER dollars in order to provide those programs.
And I don't have an issue with that. It's how we communicated it to the community and what their expectations have become, and the misinformation that this board is deleting a voluntary pre-kindergarten program without any knowledge of the pieces that we're discussing today. And that's all okay, because we are discussing it today. The contracts that we are contracting, for example, the Early Learning Coalition, if I understand you correctly, to say that with VPK, that actually the money goes from the state for VPK or early learning, any of your labels, goes actually through the Early Learning Coalitions, and if we wanted to pursue any of that, would come to us from them. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah. So if we were to offer a voluntary pre-kindergarten program, then we would go into, and there's a few steps to it, because we've had to do this every year for summer VPK. While we haven't offered school year programs, there's a provider portal, if you will, that's managed through the ELC. We fill out a lot of information into that portal. There's the monitoring aspects that are emerging as well, different tools, and we would still, we would need to do all of those things, and they're kind of overseen by the Early Learning Coalition.
Okay.
So then we would then submit through our finance department or whomever, we would submit for reimbursement for that certain amount of hours, which is 540 hours, which is important to note is not an entire full school day. 540 hours works out to be, if we were to offer it on a daily basis, about 2 to 3 hours a day, depending on how long you were going to run the program. And there's flexibility in that as well. Then we would submit to the state through the Early Learning Coalition how many students, how many days, attendance requirements. And there's a lot of requirements that goes along with voluntary pre-kindergarten programming.
So that it would be a form to fund some programs. Do we have the opportunity to do a few classrooms in conjunction with these early learning coalitions, the numerous ones that you said were serving 1,000 students or such across the community? And or are we an all or none? What are our options? And in addition to what are our options, because the community very justifiably is demanding answers, as well as I want to gain a understanding, and I'm sure the board does, why are we contracting? Why are we sending money to the coalitions? I'm not saying we shouldn't. I just think that there needs to be an explanation, because everything I hear funnels from the state to them to us, or we have to go through them to the state to do our own thing. So where do the funds come from that we are giving them and contracting with them, and what for? In addition to, can we start any of this or and be one of those community providers and or not? So there's two questions.
Yeah. So the first, let me start with the VPK in preschool and asking, could we do it in the future? The answer is yes. It's a conversation, and you probably heard from braided funding, only because VPK itself with the funding and the different things that go into it will not cover a full day of pre-K. It just won't. And that's why you'll see districts across the state of Florida, it isn't just VPK dollars. There are additional dollars from Title I to other funding that we'll have to at least have a conversation about. So I guess to answer that question, it isn't just, hey, we hit that switch and all of a sudden we can have VPK classes. What we had in Sarasota County were preschool classes, right? We had early learning preschool classes that we were funding. And the biggest difference between the two is, one is we are funding full-time preschool. VPK is a funding source. And I think that's the part, as you guys are getting emails and things of that nature, two different pieces of, if we decide to go that route of VPK and having VPK classes, even if we only had a few of them, we would have to sit down and discuss what does that additional funding look like? How are we going to make sure that we can sustain it? And the second big piece that Tracy kind of mentioned earlier in the presentation is also about staffing, which is when we staff our programs, we staff full-time teachers at a full-time rate and training that comes with it. Some of our pre-K program, BPK programs, actually do not necessarily have to have full-time instructors. There is training that goes with it that you saw. She shared a slide with State of Florida. So within that is why if we decided to move forward and talk about BPK, we would have to really sit down and discuss what does that funding, that braided funding look like, and then how do we sustain it? The second part of the question about contracts. So we do have families that from speech to other things that they may need that they are attending an actual preschool that we then contract with someone to be able to provide that resource to them at that site. The difference between that is we have kids that come to us within our ESC programming that we provided when they're here. So that is why we also do contracts as well with some of them.
So when you say that we have a contract with an early learning coalition and we're providing them with funds, it is to provide services, supplemental services like speech or such to our students and not to theirs?
It would be, well, to me, it's students that are enrolled with them, but I'll be very honest, these are students that are going to come to us.
So we're supplementing their program and using our ESE IDEA dollars to do it?
That
I'm
would be
just
correct.
trying to
No, that would
get
be
a
correct.
handle on
Yep.
what we're doing.
Yes.
So we've had, again, if I can just jump in. So those contracts have been in place for a long time. And they're not contracts that we have with the Early Learning Coalition. They're contracts that we have with different agencies. And the purpose of those contracts initially was because all of our programs serve, at that time, prior to this past year, the majority of our programs served exceptional student education and were required by state and federal law to also offer a least restrictive environment, which would be inclusive. So if for pre-K or preschool as well. So if we had 100% of our classes serving just ESE, and we have a family, say, who moves from out of state and had a student with a disability who was being served in a general education pre-kindergarten classroom.
In the
and
community.
That's, right, correct, or wherever. I mean, because up north they have different models. A lot of the schools up north may have general education pre-kindergarten programming, and so when they come here, we're required to offer what we call commensurate services. And an IEP team may decide, hey, this little child, this little boy or this little girl may need to have benefit of being in a classroom with general education children, and so we maintain those contracts so that we can continue to provide that when the majority of our programs serve as a separate placement for pre-K.
Provided at a organization offering those classes, general ed in the community, different than what we've been offering.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is a lot of information, and you cannot even begin to believe the confusion out there with it. So if I could just brief what I believe you've said for purposes of our community and going forward, that if we wanted to indulge in a early learning option, for example, voluntary pre-kindergarten, because it is at least partially funded, versus what we have done, which is early learning, I don't know, you got me confused already what we're calling which, that had no funding. It seems to me that we would logically move towards a VPK in that we could do it in conjunction or in addition to what's offered in the community. And we would at least have partial funding, so then the conversation of this board would move towards where we would get the additional funding for our school model being all day. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we're making progress. And my last two things are, I would be very interested, and I think the community would, I've asked for it a few times, in focusing in on, as we go forward, and this board, I know you're all interested in pre-K, it's a given, that we need data on how we are doing. You said there's data from the early learning coalitions and the other organizations by different name. What is that data? How do we compare what we can offer versus what they can offer? How the full day model, the partial day, those pieces. If we're going to go forward and listen to our community, and our community thinks we've taken something away, and we have not, don't want to. We need that data to make informed decisions sooner versus later in the budget window. And then secondly, all this information, and I've had people ask me for multiple years pre-K questions, and my pet peeve is how visible, even though a lot of these services, we're doing the exceptional student education, we started an early learning that was being used, COVID relief dollars were being used for, that have all these questions on, I have a 4-year-old, I have a 3-year-old, and I don't know what to do and I don't know where to go next. Well, logically, they all think they should be able to come to our school system and get those answers. They don't know that there are these coalitions. They don't know how it's funded. How visible is all of this stuff on our webpage to give them direction?
So we have a link on our Sarasota County webpage that parents can access that includes the Sarasota County Early Learning Coalition number, as well as the number for Children First Head Start. I think if you put it into the search, it will come up. In addition, our Early Learning Coalition partners do a fabulous job with outreach. They work with all of the local organizations throughout the community to provide their information, including at local pediatricians' offices, at our hospitals, anywhere where children and family might be. We also have, through the Florida Diagnostic and Learning Resource System, a great value in our Child Find Services that does outreach for our community, and we work very closely with those organizations in getting the message out into the community. There is a lot of confusion. The terminology is broad, and different organizations use it in different ways, often interchangeably. And so I really appreciate that you're bringing this to everybody's attention, specifically the differences between voluntary pre-kindergarten programming, preschool programming, and what we were offering here. And in the interest of trying to be transparent, calling it early learning 4-year-old classroom so that we couldn't confuse pre-K and VPK. But even in calling it early learning 4-year-old classrooms, everybody's asking, well, what about your VPK program? I just saw an article in our Sarasota Herald Tribune that was touting our Laurel Nokomis program and referred to that program as VPK, and they don't even have an early learning classroom.
Thank you for reinforcing the inaccuracy of the Herald Tribune. I want to reinforce that right now in a multitude of ways.
Well, it just
taking full advantage of it. I would.
The other part of the article, though, was really great because it talked about what a great program Laurel Nokomis had and what great work they did with this particular student. So that part was great.
Which is why the community justifiably, and I'm sure everyone on this board wants it, but we need data and we need information sooner versus later, is my individual feedback, and I'm sure board members one-on-one with the superintendent will join in on their expectations of where we go with this on a very slim, sensitive timeline. And I also will be sharing with Dr. Foster one-on-one, and I encourage other board members to have their input. I have no doubt that there's all the things that you're talking about, giving information to families. And I can also tell you in all my years of being an educator, there's plenty of them that aren't getting information. I would like to suggest to our superintendent and look to my colleagues to have their input with her that we have a link on our main page for whatever title we're giving it prior to entering kindergarten, early learning, pre-K, whatever, that gives families, because the search action, quite frankly, doesn't work for everyone, so that it's immediately there. It needs to be accessible. We need to reduce the confusion. You are obviously very articulate, very learned, and have a wealth of information, and Dr. Johnson, you as well, and thank you for starting to help clear this up. And I see first up is Dr. Foster.
Yeah, so I just want to talk about a few things as we kind of explore next steps. I think, we've done a lot of talking about age 4 or what the various names that we give the programs. And so, this year we have approximately 176 with the projection. We had the projection of about 192 students for next year in the program. And I think when we look at getting our students ready for kindergarten, at any given time, we have about 17,000, 18,000 kids at home from birth through age 4. And so, we are a K-12 organization. And when we look at working and partnering with the community, we're partnering not just for the kids that are 4, but all the way back to birth. And I think that's working with all of our providers, and whatever dollars we contribute, which currently we had from ESSER dollars initially allocated over $6 million for this project over 2 years. So whatever dollars that we as a school district provide, whether it's a referendum or other sources, or that we reach out to community partners and foundations. My thing is, our overall goal is to get our 5-year-olds ready to come into school. So, I think the concern that I had when I, moved into this position and looking at $3 million next year for 196 students is there's a big need out there overall. I know I hear from parents, from birth, trying to find care for their infant child. And the slide that Ms. Cardenas shared was 90% development, and that was birth through age 5. So that's, in my opinion, whatever program we do, we really need to look at the overall program and how we can partner with providers so that we are providing our 17 to 18,000 future students that will come to us with what they need in their early development so that they're ready. And I just don't want us to spend a lot of money and only focus on age 4. I want to make sure that we are partnering to capture, the whole picture there. So just kind of wanted to make that comment. And then the other thing, if we do talk about providing classrooms at our schools, I think we need to also look at space. That was something that was also becoming an issue. And, I don't know if we need to do this, or maybe it could be at a future time, Mr. Dumas can talk about where we were starting to have to look at additional space for additional classrooms in addition to our K-12 if we were going to continue to expand the program that we had in place. So,
Mr. Edwards, you're on, and Mr. Enos, you're on deck.
Thank you. I heard a lot of good things for the first time since probably, I would say, the first time you and I talked about realignment and the potential termination of the 14 classrooms, which on the slide number 3, the 14 classrooms, as I understand it, is the early learning 14. And that is pre-K, so I'm trying to keep the vernacular all the same. It's pre-K, it's 4-year-olds, and it's 14 classrooms. And my understanding, to go one step, that is kind of the gold star of what early learning is about. But even further, it can be a tremendous partnership with the parents, because the parents, there's additional learning that parents can go through to have the student ready for kindergarten, and all of that work that, and by the way, is to Dr. Foster's point, which I'm hearing again, more good stuff, that we don't want to just focus on that classroom. We want to have as much influence leading up to that classroom. So I'm going to give you, because from that first conversation that you and I had, Dr. Foster, I did do something similar to Mrs. Rose, and I did a deep dive trying to figure out what all the terms are, what does this mean, not just here in Sarasota, but in the country, and what does early learning mean, and what does it mean here in the state of Florida. So I'm going to say that you touched on a term called braiding, and it's the braiding of the financing that gets us the most amount of dollars that is available from the federal government and from the state government, whether it's 4 hours of VPK, which is not pre-K, but it can be utilized to get to the pre-K, and the ESE dollars if those gen ed classrooms become inclusionary. So we start to get the ESE dollars and move them, and all of that funding gets focused into a gen ed inclusionary pre-K classroom. Did I say that all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're all speaking the same language. Okay, So my understanding of the start of those 14 classrooms, in addition to the ESSER dollars that got attached to those 14 classrooms, that Tracy moved from an ESE position of pre-K, but into a larger, how can we have this bigger program that over time prevents us from being in the conversation that we are in now, which is how can we afford this? Because we haven't braided in the other dollars. And my understanding of the pre-K investment with ESSER dollars was that it was going to take 2 to 3 years of braiding to make the programs, to have our students be kindergarten ready. And it was going to take 2 years of doing that. So that is my understanding, at least 2 years. And all of the different funding sources that Tracy so beautifully pointed out that are out there in various programs, whether it's preschool or VPK or ESE, how do we get all of those dollars and get them so that it's a cost per student and maybe some referendum dollars down the road, not a whole bunch of it, but part of it, because the real piece of what I'm understanding and the data that I'm seeing from early education, if you just Google pre-K and benefits of pre-K, you're going to get tons of data about why it's important. And a lot of it is financial. But all of these talks that we've had over the last year and a half about reading remediation, we try that it doesn't solve the achievement gap, but it closes the achievement gap, and that because we get them sooner, we have the opportunity to make them ready. So I'm more interested in, and by the way, there is a confusion, and hopefully we can clear this up. There is a confusion that the 14 classrooms are in fact terminated because principals are seeing that where they were, they don't have those teacher allocations and those teacher dollars that they had, so they're perceiving it as terminated. So to say we haven't terminated, some people are perceiving it, and that's partially why the community is hearing it's been terminated. So, and then lastly, I'm going to throw this out there. I still haven't seen, I understand the $3 million, and then you break it down to 190 students, and but I need to see that worksheet of what's included in that $16,000. And I've asked for it, and it's an important component because I need to see if we're sharing the administrative dollars correctly through all of those programs, because I still haven't seen that. I just seen the basic math of $3 million was ESSER, and that's not sustainable. And it's not. The plan was to make it sustainable or as cost effective as possible. Lastly, the other piece of this that's killer important for me, because I keep being told, well, we have to realign and we have to make these decisions because we have to get our budget ready for July. Well, to me, I'm hearing that we're talking about 45-day centers. I don't know what they're about. We had on the consent agenda and being taken off the consent agenda portables to a pretty hefty tune, and I think they're connected to that. And then there's another high-level security meeting that I'm hearing is part of this amazing realignment, which somehow doesn't include early learning. And all of that to me is connected, because one of the major data points here is that for every dollar that's spent on pre-K, over time it saves $7.12 on remediation, whether that be through behavioral modifications or counseling or whatever, because we've had them early on and have been able to address a lot of those issues early. And it's even greater numbers as you go further into how people grow up and how they affect in society. So it's a bigger picture than just pre-K, and I'm hoping that we can have that bigger conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, and I concur. I'm not supporting any realignment until we have all of the facts, and we are upholding our fiduciary responsibility at the same time that it's in conjunction with growing the greatest quality and having the opportunity to have these conversations, look at data, all the pieces. So I think we're moving in giving Dr. Foster at least the same message, and I'm sure that the rest of the board members will join in. You're up, Mr. Enos.
Okay, so for the law enforcement officer, let's take this where we need to take it, okay? Which is slower. Just kidding, law enforcement peeps out there, you know me. Anyway, here's the thing. So first thing, per Florida state statute, we have to have a VPK program. Correct.
In the summer, we're required to offer a summer VPK program taught by a certified instructor. So that needs to be somebody who has that background and has a bachelor's degree. And we are only required to offer a summer VPK program.
So we have to have a summer VPK. So then the pre-K program that we offer is actually fulfills the requirement for the summer VPK?
So we have a school year ESE preschool program serving students ages 3 to 5. Those 14 classrooms at 8 different elementary school sites, which we called early learning to try to lessen the confusion, those are for 4-year-olds, and those are general education. There's no requirement for those classrooms other than for the ESE part, and we are required through IDA to offer an LRE, and that's why we have contracts with outside agencies.
So we have an LRE for the VPK, for the pre-K, for the IDA, for the FERPA, for anyway. So kind of get it. So kind of this is what I'm really kind of looking at is because I think it ultimately is, you know, I've said it a million times, if you wait till a student is 16 years old and you're trying to change their behavior, I'm just from my lens that I've had, it becomes very, very difficult than if you were trying to change kids who are in elementary school to be able to be able to read, to write, to all those things that we know that leads to their success. So ultimately, you know, I would like to see that we have a VBK program in every elementary school. But the question that I have for that is if you look at the data and you just went at 3 years old and then you started in kindergarten, or you just went at 4 years old and started kindergarten, do you extrapolate that out to see where they are successfully? Or is it you go at 3 and you go at 4, and then we go ahead and then you come in at kindergarten at this particular rate? Or is it if I only go at 3rd or 4th? Because what I'm trying to get at is if we did a VPK, we did the funding, we did it for that time period, we offered it through the year, we have the SE requirement in there, but we have the VPK, but we can offer it to more parents everywhere from, you know, Englewood all the way up to Emma Booker, and we do it at all, and we really want to impact reading K through 3, and we're looking at the whole phonics, we're looking at the stuff. I know from talking to some of the community foundations is that they are looking at particularly funding where they're going to get their most impact potentially as something is, and when I talked to them about, because I was confused what I thought pre-K was VPK, but today it's not. So I guess my question is, if we were to apply to do VPK, because I also know that I sat on the Human Service Advisory Council for the Sarasota County, and I know that they also get all of those get money too from the county as well. So there's state, there's federal, but there's also county money that goes to them specifically. So then my question would be is, you know, I'm looking at, okay, so if we were to offer that and we did it at 4th, but we did it because it says again for staffing in reference to having a certified teacher as to this other person with a certification. So when we were looking at that to offer it to have the biggest impact for the most people at 4 years old, a lot of parents want to, you know, I think that that's something. If it was offered county, I'm just saying as an example, I mean, we're not in all 23, but to offer at that level to have a true impact. I didn't know if there was data if you just went at 3 or if you just went at 4 or if you did the VPK, because that would obviously statutorily fill the requirement. We have to have the ESC piece anyway. You have to have it, you know, the summer. So is there a way to offset the cost for the braiding to be able to offer it at every elementary school to have the biggest impact, but have it as a VPK, but without having 14 classrooms, but ultimately having, you know what I'm saying? Like being able to have it under the whole piece and then in the summer have the certified teacher. So that's kind of where I'm going with it, to be able to, because I think it's so important to have it available for all parents, you know, to be able to, at all elementary schools, because obviously transportation is an issue. You look at the economy. So I know I'm kind of speaking in circles, but I'm trying to figure it out in my own mind. We're statutorily required. We are doing it currently with the model we have, but is there a way to expand the model that's cheaper so it encompasses everybody to provide the most service for kids and families that we can, even if it's just fourth grade with the ESC component? So that's kind of my question.
So I really appreciate your question, and I appreciate the comments also made by Mr. Edwards. And I just want to go back to my transition from being a pre-K supervisor into a director. At that time, what you would hear from Mr. Renoff, from Dr. Johnson, from everyone on board was that our focus was really on enhancing what we were doing in pre-K. Our idea is that we need to enhance how we are collaborating with those folks throughout the community. That has been huge throughout this whole process. Everybody's laughing and, you know, nodding about how complicated it is, and is it VPK, is it pre-K, is it preschool? We're not isolated there. That's throughout our community. It's more than likely throughout the state of Florida. What we're kind of conflating in some ways is how we can consider or look at how to fund programs. And we cannot absolutely do that in isolation. In other words, where we're a K through 12, as Dr. Foster talks about, a K through 12 model district where we provide, and I'm so proud to have been in the district since 1999 and worked with so many fabulous folks and leaders, not only at the schools, but at the district level, families that are involved and children that we're serving. That's something that I'm, you know, as all of you are, truly passionate about. What we have to think about is, where are we broadening our scope in terms of how we are collaboratively looking at serving birth through age 5 prior to getting into pre-K? And it is very complicated, and we have to do a great job of making sure our families understand that. I love the suggestion that you made, Ms. Rose, on putting it on the front page right there on the first page on the Sarasota County website. I want to state that without those partnerships, these events that are coming up, by the way, next week, Wednesday at STC here in Beneva, family party if you've got an incoming kindergarten. So next Wednesday, and then again on Friday out in Northport at that STC location, pizza and chicken nuggets. I mean, that is absolutely an opportunity that we have and we would not be able to do without our Early Learning Coalition partners. So when we talk about enhancing what we're doing, that's what we're talking about. We talked about facilities. Mr. Dumas would probably have a very stern conversation with me if I said I was going to put pre-K at every single school site, and we have school sites that are struggling to find classrooms for kindergarten age students. So, you know, when you think about setting and system level considerations within a district, it involves more than just the classroom, the teacher, the family, and the student. And obviously, we want to work very hard to serve all of our earliest learners. We have to do that collaboratively in partnership because it's something that we can all agree on is very, very important.
So, Tracy, to piggyback to answer your question, Mr. Enos, remember VPK dollars are for 4-year-olds. So for the 3-year-olds, we would be having a whole different conversation right now. So kind of focusing on that 4-year-old, if we did have a conversation down the road about braided funding, would be those VPK dollars, correct, would be for 4-year-olds, not necessarily 3-year-olds. That's another conversation about funding, which we wouldn't get into necessarily at this particular point. Our focus at one point, of course, was on 4-year-olds in early learning. And I guess to kind of answer your question, Mrs. Rose, I mean, clearly we will share anything with Dr. Foster that she needs. Data related, you know, moving forward, wherever that conversation needs to go with one-on-ones, I'll have Tracy touch base with Dr. Foster to actually see, is there anything that she needs as part of conversations as we move forward?
Yeah, I could tell our workshops are very successful because there's a whole list of people here, colleagues that want to have input. I'm not in favor of going from 0 to 100. I think we need to work through trying to sustain some form of what we have. And for me, I think what I'm hearing from all board members is I always want to be at 100 tomorrow, but rationally, we need some proposals, some recommendations, some data, from a financial standpoint, what are all the options, and considering the time sensitivity of the budget, as well as there is a K-12 budget in process. So for me, it would be looking at how can we listen to our community and look at sustaining something we've started or similar. But again, everybody has the opportunity for one-on-ones with the superintendent. And next up is Dr. Foster.
So yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the program, and just as we start to explore other options. Like I said, this upcoming year we were projected to hit about just under 200. And I just, if we explore this, and let's say we expand to 400, 600, let's even say 1,000 kids, which is phenomenal. Our ultimate goal is to get all of our students as they enter kindergarten ready to go. I just want to make sure that we have the resources here to have those connections within the community, so that we are providing resources, as I said, all through the through all ages, so that when our kids enter in kindergarten, they're ready to go. And I know, from having been at the elementary school for most of my years, for over 24 years, I know in running an elementary school, we had a number of parents that would come in to do tours, and it wasn't even necessarily for our school. It was just in general, just to have, I want to know what kindergarten's all about. We would have parents come in at age 3. We'd have people come in just to get an idea of what that looks like. So the thought is, I want to make sure whatever program we move forward with, that we make sure we have the resources at the district level, that we're really able to communicate to our families, all families of all the kids that are sitting at home from, in the younger years. What can you do with your child? What are some strategies as far as reading to your child, to providing resources? Because a lot of parents don't know potentially how to do that, how to do questioning and stuff as they're doing read alouds with their children, and just different resources in general. So I think it's twofold. I don't want us to think that just having 200 kids, 400 kids, 600 kids in our schools, in every school at age 4 is going to be the answer to have us totally ready at age 5, but making sure that whatever resources that we put to early learning and to collaborating with the community, that we have the whole picture, so that all of our kids, because that's ultimately, I think, all of our goal, is that every student comes to kindergarten ready to go and has what they need.
And we can't rule out or ignore the fact that we have several organizations that have been doing a quality job. This is going to be a process. Ms. Marinelli?
Thank you. I'm going to try to be really brief and not go over all this. I think it's very obvious that we need to partner with our community. We cannot do this all by ourselves. We are not in the business of birth through 12th, but we collaborate and work with our community members. So if we have to figure out a way to continue what we started with the 4-year-olds, that's fine. But I do think all of us need to do a much better job of communicating to the public. And this is not a criticism. I'm saying all of us. And the only way we can do it is to have accurate information, because it is very confusing. So we have to figure out how to get that information out. And then we have our job to do is, can we continue with the 4-year-old program? But space is a big issue. So that's why we've got to really put a lot of thought into this and let the community know that we did not cut anything. We are just trying to figure out how to sustain it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I don't think we can go forward with this either without communicating and collaborating with the coalitions and organizations that are currently providing it. I mean, we don't want to walk on each other. So there's several pieces here. It's time sensitive. We do have a K-12 budget in process, but I think we can tackle at least what we started. Mr. Edwards, please.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm hearing great things. I would throw out that, again, through my own research, there are best practices available in the state of Florida regarding braiding. So having Tracy, who from what I understood, that was what she was trying to do in the first place was to find a way that, because we can't have everything, to your point, Mrs. Rose, we can't afford to be 100% there, and that all of what we had were certain stakes in the ground, and then what we can how we would grow. I've asked this question from several experts in our community who specialize in early education, and when they talk about the gold standard, it's always that this is what it looks like at 100. We can't be there tomorrow. And so I would say, well, isn't this better than nothing? And isn't this better than nothing? And we kind of got it sequential of how and that's what I think you would be recommending to us is, here's where we are, here's where I think we could be 2 years from now, and here's how we can afford it. That's what I'm looking to hear, because at the end of the day, I'm so convinced that having at least our youngsters ready for kindergarten is the goal. That's the short-term goal, so that we can affect the achievement gap by the third grade, we can affect reading scores and math scores. By the way, those are the scores that I asked for from Goshio. Those scores are the scores that are not COVID related in those Goshio. So you can see the test scores that didn't have kids going in and out that were consistent. It does have an impact. Correct, Dr. Johnson?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's where I'm at. So I'm excited that we're gonna hopefully get a plan, and I look forward to my one-on-ones with the superintendent about what those plans would look like.
Thank you. Phenomenal progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And remember the early learning opportunity next week on Wednesday and on Friday.
Chicken nuggets, chicken nuggets.
So next up, I'd like to welcome an update. We're having an update on the McIntosh Farm, and we have some folks coming forward. And but I do want to recognize the flowers that were brought in. Everybody got flowers, holding them up. In muffins. Thank you very much to Katie Schmitz and Todd Underhill and Kate Trudeau. Did I pronounce that correct? Troggett. And for treating the board so kindly and providing products that came from our farm and Sarasota High School, and really appreciate you. Dr. Foster, would you like to introduce this next section?
All right, so it was requested to give an update on the McIntosh Farm, and so we have our team here to provide a little bit more information. I'll turn it over to, I don't know if Trip Jennings, you're going to take the lead?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Foster. First of all, thank you, Ms. Marinelli, for inquiring about the status of the farm project at the last workshop. As Jane and Jody were discussing all of the construction projects, this is definitely one of them on the radar, and I thank them for suggesting that I join to talk about what we're going to do with the facility once it's built. I'm kind of leading the charge on the instructional impact of what we're hoping to gain from that property. So just briefly on the gifts you have there, that is a 100% edible bouquet. There's some mustard in there, some mint, and some other stuff, all grown in our farm. Our school district farm, and then you also got a bag with some mulberry muffins in them, which those were made by Sarasota High culinary students from ingredients grown on our farm. So the students are well aware of what we're trying to do with this project, so they knew we were coming today, so they really were excited to thank you in their way. So what we want to talk about impact today. What is our desired impact for this project? Real quickly, just a brief overview of the property under discussion. This is the 40 acres just west of McIntosh Middle School that you literally have to drive right through to get to and from McIntosh Middle. It is natural land, which we can now say is in the middle of town. When you look at the ever-increasing development and new housing and new businesses that are going up, now that area could be considered in the middle of town. So we have 40 acres of land that, to me, we have been doing a great job of doing ag instruction on, but we can take great to awesome with a few changes. So that's what we're proposing today. Short history on the property. In the late 40s, early 50s, Jasper Crowley, who was the first principal of Fruitville Elementary, also a ag teacher at Sarasota High School. He was the advisor for Sarasota's first FFA chapter. He was integral in championing the district to gain that land strictly for the use of furthering agriculture education. And that's exactly what our district has been doing since then with that property in one way or another. It's been called VOAG, vocational ag at one point. There's FFA and 4-H groups, students and parents and alumni have used that property for meetings to host animal projects and some events. By the way, our current Food and Nutrition Services Director, Sarah Dan, is an FFA alumni who used that farm site when she was a student here. McIntosh Middle has an ag program. They use that property as well. They have their own land lab back at the campus, but sometimes they walk up the road and expand that learning into the larger farm property site. Suncoast Technical College used that site for their veterinary assisting program for several years. STC Construction Trades have been out there, mostly the plumbing group, which is absolutely wonderful work-based learning experiences for them to not just study irrigation systems, but let's go install and maintain and work with one in real life. And then also the Food Nutrition Department's Edible Schoolyard program has also spent some time on that property. So again, since our district acquired that years and years ago, we have been doing some quality ag education, but my team feels like with a few facility renovations and some new programming, we could take that to the next level. So the facility renovation, I know Jane and Jody spoke on it briefly. Specifically, we're looking to add a large greenhouse, which will have hydroponic and aquaponics. I don't know if you got the handouts with some of the photos that I sent ahead of time. There's some renderings on there where you can kind of see what it might potentially look like.
Yes, we did.
Okay, good. A large covered arena so students can practice showing their animals. We can hold different events and activities in there. And 2 animal barns, one for cattle, another one for swine or mid-size animals, and then also a food science lab or demonstration kitchen. Those are the only facility changes, but then with adding all of that comes you have to upgrade code, and it's a school site, so we have to have safety and security, all of that. So basically for the last year, that's what we've been doing, is getting through the design process, making sure we're covering all required bases, making sure everyone has a voice at the table, especially the people who are going to use it. I'm not going to personally be at that site every day, so I want to hear from the people that are. So I did invite some friends to join me today to speak on the various levels of impact. David Jones, principal of Sarasota High, will speak on how this will impact the Sarasota High community. Kate Troggett is our acting farm manager. She can kind of speak on what some of the programming will be offered there. We have Katie Schmitz, who is our Sarasota High School FFA chapter president, and she can speak on briefly on the student impact. And then we have Todd Underhill, a community member who can speak from the community perspective on this project. So what are we going to do there? We build all those cool things, then what? What are we going to do with it? We want to enhance what's already been going on there. We're not looking to wipe it clean and start over. We want to take the ag instruction, the FFA, the 4-H, the animal projects, the plant food science, and enhance it. We want to create an agricultural literacy hub for our community. That's not just for our students, but it's something that our community can utilize and participate with and engage with to increase their own agricultural literacy. Because we are now multiple generations removed from people understanding how to grow their own food, how that relates to nutrition and personal health, and on and on. So we want to kind of reinvigorate that a little bit. We want to increase the awareness and understanding of agriculture and how it impacts everyone's daily lives, whether we realize it or not. We want to also increase the amount of fresh local produce that's grown by students for students to feed our cafeterias and culinary arts programs. We will essentially create a menu or a list of farm experience opportunities for all students pre-K through 12 to be able to come to the farm and have some kind of experience that takes them beyond their classroom walls, where they can take a core curriculum benchmark, learn about it in their classroom, and then extend that into reality. And instead of just talking about the sights and smells of the environment, they can actually go do it and engage with plants and animals in a learning environment. We want to align with Department of Education grade level standards so that we can enhance topics that students are already studying. Again, pre-K through 12 applications: sensory, nutrition, food safety, life science, the parts of a plant, food production, biology, ecology, environmental science. You could go across the board. We want to take their experiences in their classrooms and amplify them with their experiences at the farm, which that can lead to increased retention of content, better understanding of content, and higher engagement. All good things. We want to educate students and families as to where their food comes from, how it relates to nutrition, health, what is sustainable farming, and what are some environmentally and socially responsible food production practices. Research says that children who understand how to and grow some of their own develop a deeper connection with food, which can lead to healthier diets, which leads to improved mental health. Again, also a good thing for everyone. So some of the partners that we have on board that we're going to be working with regularly, food nutrition is one I mentioned already. We want to increase the farm to plate program, enhance it, and farm to cafeteria. We want to enhance our district's wellness program by utilizing the farm. We want to also enhance the fresh fruits and vegetables program that goes through FNS. A couple schools out of the gate that are partnering with us: Sarasota High School and McIntosh Middle School. Those are our only two middle and high schools with ag CTE pathways. And so Sarasota High has a food science pathway, and so does McIntosh. We want to enhance those programs to almost create them as magnets. So if a student wants the best ag program you've got in your district, those are the two schools to go to because of their direct access to the farm property. And also they're pretty good schools. We want to partner with Career and Technical Education, which that's really my home base, as well as Suncoast Technical College. You can just think about all the things that I've explained, how we can tie career education to all of those. That's a big piece as well. And again, the construction and plumbing trades programs, countless levels of work-based learning opportunities on a farm for those students. Culinary students can use it as ingredient sourcing. It can be used as a hospitality venue. We can host events there, so our hospitality and business management students can get involved. Our engineering students can come and help us design and fabricate new tools, maybe problem solve and innovate some of our practices around the farm. So lots of different ways to engage different types of students. We also want to partner with the Sarasota County Fair Board and local cattlemen's associations. I sit on the Sarasota County Fair Board, and so I've kept them up to speed on what we're trying to do as well. They're very excited. We want to increase the amount of students that participate in the fair with animal and plant projects. Those things help support our community's agricultural ecosystem. The fair is more than just funnel cake and tilt-a-whirls. It's also designed to help educate our community on the importance of our local agriculture and how we can support that. And then finally, one of our initial partners is the University of Florida's IFAS program, which is Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, IFAS. You've probably seen their signs around. They have local offices here in town. We work with them closely, so their partnership will be able to build pathways to colleges and careers, offer more work-based learning. They can offer trainings and workshops. They can do events at this site that will have a broad community reach, including farm tours, envirothons, ecology day, farm safety days, and things of the like. So I'm going to hand it over to David Jones, who can speak on from his perspective.
Well, Good afternoon, members of the board, Superintendent Foster, Patrick and Kathy. Good to see all of you again. It's been a while for some of you. This feels like deja vu to me. About 4 years ago, I was sitting before the board giving an impassioned plea for our Circus Arts magnet. And just to let you know what happened as a result of that, now it has an international stamp on it. It's known all over the world. We have Cirque du Soleil instructors. We have the world champion trampoline artist. It's pretty incredible, and that's a reality that this school board made possible. Today I'm here to talk about something that's been a vision and a passion of mine much longer than the circus arts. It was probably born out of the reality that I would see as an administrator of how many of my kids were involved in FFA or 4-H or both, and yet didn't have opportunities within the school day or the school system to do anything about it. And conjoined with that was the opportunity to go to Epcot and see Living with the Land. And I don't know if that's something you've ever been on. It's right next to Soaring, and Soaring kind of trumps it. But if you go on that, you see the highest tech growing and agricultural programs taking place. And it really, really bothered me that something like this could be taking place, and yet my students had no access to something like that. So my vision in reality was pretty puny. I just wanted a place where we could have aquaculture, hydroponics, the opportunity for our kids to certainly experience plant growth hands-on, but I really wanted the animal component to be conjoined too. Now, as an administrator, I go to a lot of student events, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot, and it's a rare night that I don't run into somebody from the agricultural community, whether it's a business member, a community member, or a parent, who doesn't have some input or some sort of involvement in the ag community. And in Sarasota County, it just bewildered me. Why don't we have the state-of-the-art, most awesome program that exists? And so I wanted a couple greenhouses on our campus, and then at some point, I wanted my students to not have to find their own farms, their own places to take their hogs to raise them. I wanted them to be able to do that in close proximity to Sarasota High School, hence the farm at McIntosh, and be able to do that. Well, working with people like Tripp, whose vision was much bigger than mine, and having Sarah Dan come on board, and seeing what the potential was to give our kids the opportunity. And when I talk about opportunity, we talk about a 3-circle model, and it's pretty important to understand this because it's classroom instruction is one of those circles. The other is FFA involvement, and the third is supervised agricultural experiences. And having those opportunities to be hands-on, to learn what it really means to work with the animals, to work with the plants, to be a successful farmer or rancher, it's pretty incredible. And so being able to put this thing on steroids, and by the way, Dr. Foster, I love what you always talk about. It's only as good as the people that you put in front of it. And right now, today, we are blessed to have some incredibly talented people. Kate's going to speak in a moment. Katie is also pretty awesome, and she's going to speak. By the way, if you turn to the back side of that picture and look at the upper right corner, you will see 4 of our students, and you'll see the magnitude of awards they took just in the recent county fair, all based on what they're doing currently. But we have Kate here as a farm manager, probably one of the most talented, most insightful, and hardworking people that we could have working to that end to make the farm available, even in its current form. And then you probably don't know this, but the assistant principal that I was able to hire last year was probably the top FFA instructor in the state when she was a teacher. It's only 10% of schools that participate in agriculture in the nation are awarded a 3-star designation. She earned that all 4 years that she did it. Now she's an assistant principal putting behind. So there's a lot of passion and drive from the community, from us, certainly from our students to make this happen. And I just thank you for the opportunity that we can open the doors bigger, more vastly. The pictures on the backside of that brochure that were handed out do tell a story, because little kids are excited about agriculture. And I want big kids to be excited about agriculture. When you speak to anyone in the ag community, we're desperate for people. We're desperate for people who are going to continue this tradition. And one of the realities that I've discovered in my higher years of age is we all need the products of agriculture to survive. And so it's a program I'm very, very excited about, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as it pertains to the 25 to 2,600 kids that I'm blessed to shepherd every year, and getting them a bunch of them in here. And so am I turning it back over to you or going directly to Kate?
We can go right down the line. That's fine.
We can go right down the line.
I think we're going to want you in the mic.
All right. I picked the pull-up chair, so I guess that means I get to adjust the mic also. Thank you all for having me here today. I am so lucky to be in this work. So I'm currently your farm to school coordinator. The kids often refer to me as Farmer Kate. It means I'm your acting farm manager and also kind of fill in the gaps between this vision and the practicalities of how we make that happen inside of those barns and greenhouses and gardens and out in the fields. The pictures, I think, are a great example. I wanted to touch on that really quickly so that you all have kind of a greater understanding of what you're seeing here. So these students here in this top corner, they are at Laurel Nokomis. They are kindergartners. We worked with them. We're actually trialing those sunflowers that are on the desks in front of you. The instructor down there wanted to plant seeds, Mr. Kevin O'Gorman down at Laurel Nokomis, with his kindergartners and have the timing be so that they could nurture them and learn through that whole process and cut those flowers and walk across the stage with them at graduation, which is a fantastic vision and also means someone needs to know how we grow those sunflowers so that they are ready precisely at graduation week. So we are working on that with them. We were also, I think you can see in some of those, maybe the other photos that didn't come through, in order to do that, they needed a higher functioning irrigation system, which is also an instructional opportunity for our plumbing students. And we're lucky to have a great instructor there that could come down to that elementary school, give those students exposure into that career pathway, and also work on fixing that irrigation system so that they could grow those sunflowers. And that that trial is also will correspond with our staff appreciation week. We also have photos in here of one of the crossover classes. So our agri-science students with Sarasota High did a crossover class with our plumbing students out at the farm so that the students could understand the entirety of the systems and how they all connect, how that water gets from the well out onto the field. But I think mostly I want to know what questions you all have because there's just so much.
I have a question.
Yes.
When can we, as a board, walk through this facility with students on it and animals?
The timeline-wise, as far as I understand, and again, I'm not, that my specialty is more of the instructional use of it, not the construction and funding and timeline side. But what I do know is that this summer you will see on a board agenda approval for the initial phase of the project. Initial funding has already been allocated for it. That'll get us the lion's share of the project. That we are, like I said, the past year we've been going through the design work with the architects and the engineers. And so that is almost finished as of now. I think by the end of May, we'll have our drawings all done. And so then it'll be pricing from the general contractor, and then you'll see it on the agenda this summer. So then that would be a fall start to construction. And what I'm told, it's a 5 or 6 month end to end once construction starts. So probably looking at a January, February completion of phase 1 for 24.
And Mr. Dumas, do you concur?
He thumbs up, so that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could join in, if I take your question literally, if I take your question literally, I would invite you to come out now because students are there 2 to 3 times a week. Kate is there. And so there's the opportunity to see it, particularly in this pre-construction phase, and then to capture that vision. I'd love it. We simply need to set that up.
Love that too.
Katie, we asked our FFA president to come and speak on from the student perspective.
All right. Hi, Board members, thank you for allowing me this time to talk about the impacts that agricultural education has had on me. My name is Katie Schmitz, and I'm a senior in the ACE program at Sarasota High School. I've been in 4-H for 13 years and FFA for 3, and these programs have sincerely changed my life, and they've given me opportunities that I never would have dreamed of having. I started as a little 5-year-old who couldn't even say my name in a meeting by myself, and now as a senior in high school, I've been accepted into the University of Florida for agricultural operations management. I have gained so much from these programs, and I could not have done it without the farm at McIntosh Middle School. For 7 years, this farm held pigs, dairy cows, and a beef heifer for me to train and show at the Sarasota County Fair. And this is not including other people's steers, llamas, and other animals that I've helped raise. This many years of experience has taught me about the farming industry from the lens of animals, and now that I've returned to the farm with my agri-science class, I've planted a garden and learned about the farming industry from the lens of plants and crops. My experiences in 4-H and FFA have been super impactful. I have learned many skills that will help me succeed long after high school and even college. To start, they have given me the confidence to stand up here and talk to you. Before, I would have never thought of speaking in front of any crowd, but due to running meetings, giving demonstrations about my projects like incubating duck eggs, and speaking to my peers from other chapters, I now don't have a second thought about speaking to others. I have also gained a strong work ethic because of my animals and my role as president in multiple clubs, which has helped in my success in the ACE program as well as becoming a gator. Further, I have gained empathy and kindness towards others. Through raising animals, you are taught that many people have a lot on their plate at all times, and a little kindness and patience can go a long way. This doesn't even scratch the surface of the skills that I have earned and lessons that I have learned through FFA, 4-H, agricultural education, and I'm so glad that you're considering building barns to allow future students to start on the same path that I am on. Thank you.
Very articulate, Katie, very impressive. Mr. Enos has asked for time.
Well, for those who've been around a long time, I-75, before it was I-75, was all Britain's orange groves, and you had Mr. Crowley, and you had Jeff Durrance, and you had Mr. Van, and you saw, you used to go to the fair, and I had gone to some of the pig weigh-ins back in the day, and, it was 3 times the size as it was this year. I mean, Sarasota County, you look at High Hat Ranch, Carlton Ranch, you look at all of that. I mean, this is a huge agricultural community. As I had gone to a couple of the associations for agriculture, they reminded me I happen to enjoy food, we have to have farmers. We need to bring people into this profession in order to be able to be self-sustaining. I mean, we can't have any expectations other than that. And so I know that facility at McIntosh very well, and I would tell you, this is huge to be able to do this, because once Mr. Van, once he passed away, I mean, a lot of the kids who use that for their raising their hogs had nowhere to go because, there's some limited at McIntosh, but this is really, really amazing, and I really appreciate it because I truly know how big the FFA program used to be in Sarasota County back in the day, because, if you've had All Britain's orange juice ever before, I know it's kind of hard to get now. It was top of the top, and their ice cream was good too. But anyway, I just say thank you for everything, and this is really, really something that's been needed, because I know that when students are involved in FFA, there's a lot of stuff that goes in with the responsibilities of taking care of an animal that goes on to a lot longer in life than just when they have that livestock or something that they're showing and they're raising. So thank you to all of you guys. I think it's a very, very impressive, and the drawings look great. I can't wait till it's done.
Ms. Marinelli is we want to hear from Mr. Underhill. Do you know Ms. Jeffrey Durrance?
I do, actually. I had him as a teacher. So,
Okay.
Again, my name is Todd Underhill. I'm a local cattle rancher. I actually went to McIntosh. I had Bill Crowley as an ag teacher, who was actually a chapter member in FFA with Sarah Dan. Growing up, too, my family, we had the lease on the Palmer Ranch. So we had cows that ran from Beneva Road all the way to Mayaca State Park, from Clark to Osprey. We would do the weigh-ins for the fair before we had the only set of scales at the time. So, and our headquarters for the ranch was right there where that McDonald's is right now on Clark, just before the Legacy Trail. So we've seen a lot of changes. The interstate cut through it. The railroad's gone now. But as I said, I went to McIntosh. I'm also a member of Farm Bureau, the Cattlemen's Association. I've served for over 30 years as a supervisor on the Sarasota Soil and Water Conservation District Board, which is a countywide generally elected position. Also on the Cooperative Extensions Advisory Board for the Extension Director. And I've been involved in a couple of different nonprofits, one of which had USDA grants for beginning farmers and ranchers and operated a community-supported agricultural farm in Bradenton. And the other which, in cooperation with an agreement with the school board, we operated a farmer's market on Beneva for 5 years as well. So I've dealt with a lot of different aspects of agriculture in the community. And would like to say that I think I watched agriculture in the school system really diminish from the time I was involved in it and languish in many ways. And I'd like to say that now I'm really excited and would like to reflect the excitement of a lot of other people in the ag community with what we see now in terms of what I would say people who actually have vision, passion, excitement to be working with it. And it's really, I want to commend the school board for supporting this kind of direction. I think it's something really needed. As I think I heard you comment, we all eat. And that's something that we, have a connection to the land with. And the more that we can remain connected in that fashion, we also have all a responsibility as stewards for the care of the environment and the earth. And I think that's another thing that can be learned with agriculture in terms of that kind of stewardship. So it presents an opportunity for all students, whether they're interested ultimately in agriculture or not, to learn about that kind of connection. I think the scope of what can take place at that facility, I think, is really amazing. When we look at the USDA census of agriculture for Sarasota County, none of you are going to be surprised to see that agricultural land is reducing in acreage. There's less of it every year. However, you might be surprised to learn that every year there's also now an increase in farmers and in farms. So the trend we're seeing is more small farms. That's people experimenting, trying new things. Maybe it's people that buy 20 acres and they're retiring. But it's people that have land and need to know what to do with it. And when I was running a farmer's market, I was seeing people all the time that were showing up with value-added items that they were doing on small parcels. So there are increasing numbers of opportunities for agriculture to remain a vibrant part of our community. Well, whether we think of it in the traditional sense, which we're always going to have cattle ranches because of the conservation easements that we have in place in a lot of areas, or whether it's farming in a traditional way, or whether it's nurseries. And we're seeing nurseries that are going high-tech too. Sunfire nurseries, they have a very high-tech operation, and they need people to continually support that so that they can provide the plants that they grow that go nationwide. Or actually, in fact, they even leave the boundaries of the U.S. So we see a vibrant opportunity for people that are interested in agriculture, whether it's college-bound or vocationally. And then from a community standpoint, the opportunity to have safety days and trainings, or the Conservation District, we have an annual Envirothon that we host for high school students, a location to do that. There are so many different opportunities that I think that this truly is an opportunity that the school board has seized upon to create something that can truly be a legacy, not only in terms of its physical presence, but then even more so the minds that come through it. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Underhill. Ms. Marinelli?
Thank you. I'm really excited about this, and I'm going to be that little tickle in Jody's ear all the time to see where we are on the construction of this, because I just think the possibilities for our students are unlimited. And, we talk about the food, and so many kids think that our food just comes from Publix. They don't even have an idea what real food tastes like. For an example, you cut a tomato. How many of you cut them and they're white inside instead of a real juicy red tomato that has taste? So I think it's very important for young kids to know the food source and the difference between what organic is and the way some things are being grown now. That's not even getting into the actual the the farming part of, the animals. I go to I didn't make it this year, but I went last year to the 4-H. But growing up in Ohio, back in the day before you had modified, engineered crops, and the food source that the animals ate, doesn't taste too good today. So I think it's very important, and I am excited because, Senator Carlton called me this morning, and she is so excited that this is on the board agenda to talk about, because there are so many people. The Martin boys I've known since before they entered college, and they're very, from the Farm Bureau to the fair. There's so many people out in the community that support this, and I most certainly do. And I think the career path, I mean, Senator Carlton was telling me this morning that there is such a need for vets for large animals. And you don't think about things like that. And boy, you could really you want to make some money. You get into things like that. So I just think the possibilities are endless, and I support this 100%. And we talk about having to be competitive and to keep our families in our schools, and what a great program this would be to be able to show. And I'm really glad we're going to build on that property, because I've lived in Florida for almost 45 years, and I go up and down McIntosh all the time. So I've seen the cows, I've seen the pigs, I've seen it be like Bear, and wondering, what are we going to do? And that sign's been out there for almost 2 years. So I'm really glad that it's on the agenda and we're moving forward. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Mrs. Marinelli touched on a couple of things that I was going to bring up. I'm really excited about the career path opportunities. As you know, I'm looked at all forms of academies and exposing our young people to the opportunities that exist other than our traditional college career path, which we all support and encourage. But there's lots of other things besides that. And if our students get exposed to that in an early enough time period, then they have an opportunity. Vet services, I mean, think about how many veterinarians there are here in Sarasota, not for large animals, but just any kind of opportunity that we can show students what other career paths might get. And someone had said to me when I was talking about the Trades Academy that they're talking to students already about the trades that are going to be necessary on Mars, 30 years from now. Think about what we're going to have to grow on Mars and how we're going to sustain ourselves and how we're going to feed. So there's a lot of huge opportunity here, and life skills. Katie, great job speaking to us. You did a fantastic job. So thank you. Great job. There's nothing wrong with this part of the day at all.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Dr. Foster.
I want to thank Mr. Jones and Mr. Jennings and Kate for your passion with this program and bringing this program to life here and getting it moving and continuing to push it forward. And to me, this is what it's all about. I mean, we try to create special programs, and I know, Mr. Jones, you brought the circus program to Sarasota High already. We've got, the VPA program. We have the construction academy. I think, Katie, watching you speak and just seeing you light up with this program, this is what it's all about, is offering special programs in our schools that really make the kids excited about why they go to school every day. And so I want to thank you for coming to speak, and very impressive, what you shared this morning, and wish you the best of luck at University of Florida. Go Gators. And, but like I said, want to thank the team here for just your passion and continuing to move this forward, because I think it's an exciting project. Will make a big difference for a lot of kids.
I do have a soft goal. I haven't really shared it yet, but I would love to see every student set foot on the property at least once before they leave 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade. For one reason or another, I want to try and make that happen. So when you see the farm manager job description on tonight's board agenda approval, you'll know we need that individual to manage all of these cool things.
Well done. Thank you very much. Appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you very much for our guests and our gifts. And please thank the students for us, Mr. Jones. It was uplifting. I saw smiles on everyone's face. We have member comments left on the agenda. If that we have any board members that would like to comment before we adjourn.
Oops, I do. I hit the wrong button.
Seeing none, I am going to adjourn this meeting. Prior to doing so, oh, Ms. Marinelli, you have a comment?
I just wanted to say that I thought it was a very good meeting today because we learned so much. The pre-K, I think all of our heads are kind of spinning trying to get that all figured out. But I think everything that was on the agenda, but to end with the McIntosh Farm was a great way and very uplifting. So thank you.
Well said. Seeing no other comments, prior to adjourning, I would just like the community know that the board will be going into executive session at immediately following this adjournment for negotiations, followed by a second executive session for safety and security. And then we will be back here with bells on our shoes to welcome the community into the April 18th school board meeting at 6 o'clock. As of right now, this meeting is adjourned, and I'd like to thank all for your participation.